This will be the only video you need to watch to learn the Vienna game. All the moves in the opening, all the plans in the middle game, all the possible traps that the opponent could fall for. I've learned everything on chessreps.com and I'm about to show you how to put it in action. Starting things off in the 500 region, we're only going to be playing the Vienna game in this video. The Vienna game, the Vienna gambit, it starts with knight c3 and then black decides if it's going to be a Vienna game or a Vienna gambit based on the knight. So for example, because they moved the knight to f6, it's going to be a Vienna gambit. The funny thing about the Vienna gambit is this is already surprising for black, especially at the low levels. Because you play knight to c3, they just naturally play knight to f6. Now, d6 is played to guard the pawn, but I want you to notice that black is already being reactive. The bishop is already blocked out. We're just going to be continuing with our development. Now we develop our knight. And the goal from here is just to apply a lot of tension to this pawn. And keep in mind, this is not a free pawn. If they take the pawn, we're going to be able to play pawn to d4 and retrieve the pawn. Whenever they play knight c6, we want to go bishop to b5, pinning this knight, because this knight guards the e4 pawn, and we're trying to win the e4 pawn. Bishop to d4 was played, pinning our knight. So basically, black is saying, if we takes and then takes, my knight is not going to be able to take because this knight is going to be pinned. With that being said, we know the usual drill. A bishop goes to g4. We play h3 chasing away the bishop. But in this case, a bishop is not able to go back to h5 because that loses the bishop. So once they put the bishop on g4, they have to give up the bishop for a knight. And just like that, we're going to already have the bishop here, which is a slight advantage. And I'm happy that you guys were able to see my opponent pull the bishop back to h5. So this is one of the first traps in the Vienna game, and there's a lot of traps in the Vienna game. After the bishop goes back to h5, we play the move pawn to g4, and we're now trapping the opponent's bishop. Now, before I made this video on the Vienna game, I ensured that I went on chess reps and I studied all the lines. So I know all the lines in the Vienna game, and I'm going to be showing you how to apply them in this video. If you want to get chess reps and learn everything about the Vienna game, the link is also in the description. The best black could do here is just sacrifice the knight for the pawn and claim that this is an annoying pin. If the bishop goes back, pawn f5 just traps the bishop, and that is even worse. So this has to be the idea. Or even bishop takes. Anything where they sacrifice two pieces. Well, two pawns for the piece, but a6 doesn't help the situation. Maybe black thinks if I take the bishop, they're going to take my bishop. But we're going to be using what is called an in-between move, where we first take the knight on c6 with check. So black now has to react to this move. And once black reacts to the move, we simply take the free bishop. And on move 9, we're already ahead by a piece. Let's just take the bishop here. The knight took. One thing I want you guys to keep in mind, being a Vienna player, please be aware of these diagonals pointing towards the king. Don't allow any queen to be jumping in. It's not allowed now, or any bishops to be pinning or preventing our king from getting castled. Knight takes doesn't affect us a lot. So I'm just going to play pawn to d4 now. I'm trying to develop my bishop. D4 kind of allows pawn takes f4 or knight takes f4 though, but I'm just ahead by a piece and I'm trying to get my pieces developed as quickly as possible. So the knight took on f4, that's good. Because we're ahead by a piece, we're just going to take the knight and the goal is now to get our king castled. I'm definitely not going to be castling my king on the king side because I don't really have any pawns over there. So I'm going to move my queen to d2, preparing to castle my queen on the queen side. And I'm also attacking this pawn on f4. So to guard the pawn, black needs to play something like g5, develop the bishop to g7. Bishop to e7 was played instead. So before we castle, let's just take the free pawn. So that way g5 is not played. Then we're just going to castle our king. And this is just completely winning. Some things I want you guys to keep in mind about the Vienna game is most of the action is going to be taking place on the f file. A lot of the times we're also going to be castling on the king side in the Vienna game. But because I have no pawns over there, let's just castle on the queen side. The only downside of castling on the queen side is the fact that the rook could go to b1 and put some pressure on the b file. But the rook by itself is not going to be able to deliver a checkmate. In fact, because we castled on the queen side, it's going to be way easier for us to start putting our rooks on the files where the king is on and start an attack, especially since we're ahead by a piece. So pawn to c5 was played. It's a bad move, by the way, because my rook is on the same line as the queen. So this d pawn is actually pinned. Not sure what black sees here, but once I take this pawn, the pawn is no longer able to take. This is called a pin, by the way, when a piece is not able to move because it exposes a more valuable piece. So that's more material. We're never afraid of any bishop to g5, pinning or queen to our king, but ensure that is something that you are aware of. For example, you move this knight out the way and now your queen is pinned. But because you're a loyal subscriber who is about to like the video, I'm assuming that you guys know about the drawback principle. Rook to b8 was expecting that move. The rook gets the file. I think every single piece that I have is doing something, except this rook on h1. It's pointing towards its own pawn. Remember, do not have your rook pointing towards your own pawns. That's why I'm going to play the move rook to g1 here, putting my rook on the same line as the king. I was actually a bit hesitant just now whether I should play rook g1 because whenever the opponent has a light squared bishop or a dark square bishop, you have to be careful about the dark squares, and all my pieces are on the dark square, so I have to be extra careful here. G6 was played. Bishop to f6 was what I was a bit more afraid of, to be honest, because it put some pressure on my knight, threatened to double up the pawn, applies pressure on b2. But now I hit him with knight to d5. We're already starting the process of putting pieces on the opponent's half of the board. And do not get the thing when I say put pieces on the opponent's half of the board. You don't want to do it too early on in the opening stage of the game because then it's going to be classified as a premature attack. So notice what I do. I first develop all my pieces. I first ensure that every single piece is doing a role. I try to move each piece once. If you see me move more one piece more than once, then I'm either breaking the principle and it's a bad move, or I'm aware that I'm breaking the principle and I think there's a justification for it. Queen to d7 was played. You could say it's attacking this pawn, but we don't really care about this pawn. In fact, it would actually help our rook to get an open file. And if the queen moves away, we know about the drawback principle. It will leave the bishop unprotected. So queen to d7 doesn't do too much. Anywhere the queen go, we take the bishop on the next move. All our pieces are already developed. So remember, it's time to create a plan. Because it's opposite side castles, the plan is to attack the opponent's king on the other side of the board. Remember, when it comes to attacking the opponent's king, we want to ensure that we're attacking the focal points. And the meaning of focal points is the pawn and squares around the opponent's king that is only being guarded by the king. So g7, h7, h8 is our focal point. With that being said, I'm going to play the move queen to h6, targeting the focal points. Now I'm thinking of moves like knight to g5, and that's going to be an unstoppable checkmate. So black has to be super careful now. The bishop is guarding my knight from going to g5. So I'm also thinking of playing moves like knight takes e7, removing the guard first. Queen to b5. Bad move. And we know why this is a bad move. We don't just be cowards and be like, okay, the queen went to b5. What is it doing? It's threatening b2. Let's protect b2. We need to know what the queen is doing. The queen is attacking b2. We need to put the same effort into asking, what is the opponent's piece doing? Into asking, what is the opponent's piece no longer doing? Because we also want to check to see if the opponent makes mistakes, And this was a mistake. The bishop is left unprotected, and we're able to take the bishop with check, which means the opponent's king is now forced to move to h8. And then once the king moved to h8, that's when we can think about defending against this threat. This is also called an in-between move, by the way. So how are we going to be defending against this threat? Let's just play pawn to b3, cutting off the communication between the queen and the b2 pawn, and we should be good. Now we're just ahead by 2 pieces. Knight to g5, as we spoke about, applying more pressure to the pawns and the squares around the opponent's king. Focal point will be forced checkmate. Queen takes c5 was played. Once I hit him with knight g5, the queen has to be sacrificed. Has to. Let's go knight g5. There's nothing to prevent queen takes h7, checkmate on the next move. We also have to ensure that we're aware of the possible checks that the opponent could play. So, for example, queen e3 is a check, queen a3 is a check. But once any of these checks are played and I move my king to b1, maybe he sat the rook on b3 and I take. After that, there's not going to be any more checks. So queen takes g5 is actually the only move that makes this game last a bit longer. Rook to e8 was played, didn't even try to sack the queen. However, that's just a checkmate. More Vienna game against 600 rated players. Stick around. Opponent is now 600. Vienna it is. We know the drill. After knight c3, they decide if it's going to be a Vienna game or a Vienna gambit. Knight f6 suggests Vienna game. Knight c6 suggests Vienna gambit. Bishop b4 is one of those moves where the moment they move the bishop, it's something that you could see in the Vienna game as well. For example, if they don't play knight c6 or knight f6 and they move the bishop, one thing that I want you guys to keep in mind when it comes to the Vienna game is the bishop on f8 guards the g7 pawn, and a move like queen to g4 attacks the g7 pawn. So yes, we are breaking the opening principle that says avoid moving the queen so early on in the opening stage of the game, but you will win a lot of material with it. So the opponent decided to take on c3, and I could try to win a pawn by taking on g7, but then the opponent is able to sack the bishop with check, then play queen to f6. So I wouldn't really win a pawn. So let's just take back the bishop. Now, usually in the Vienna game, we want to take with the b pawn, play d4. But because of my lead in development now, I'm actually going to take with the d pawn. So that way my bishop gets easy development. We're still targeting the g7 pawn, by the way. And one downside of playing this queen g4 move is you are putting your queen on the same diagonal as this bishop. So you have to be careful. But if he moves the pawn thinking, okay, let's attack the queen, we're just going to take his pawn. So he has to use a move to guard his g7 pawn first. And usually when they guard the g7 pawn, we're able to go move, well, not bishop c4 yet, because there will be d5. But if the bishop is already on c4 and they play g6, the move is usually queen back to f3 because the bishop is on the same line as the queen. I'm just going to use the time to continue my development for now, though. Let's go bishop to g5 here. I'm developing my bishop. I'm applying some pressure to his queen. So I'm basically forcing the opponent to react to my move. And pawn f6 is one of those moves that I don't mind if he plays. I'm just going to pull my bishop back to e3, knowing that I'm inducing more weaknesses in his position. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to weaken his king side before he even castles. So let's pull the bishop back to e3. Again, be aware of the fact that the queen is on the same diagonal as this bishop, which means I'm just waiting on him to move this pawn. But then he plays h5, and this is exactly the type of stuff that will happen in the Vienna game. This is why we break one of the principles by moving the queen out too early, but you have to understand why. My opponent does not talk to his pieces. My opponent, all he's thinking about is, I'm going to move my pawn from h7 to attack the opponent's queen. He's not asking the pawn, but Mr. Pawn, before I move you, what were you doing on h7? If he had asked that question, he would have seen that his pawn on g6 would have been left unprotected. Now, once we take the pawn on g6, his king now just has to move. And just like that, we're 7 moves in the Vienna game, and we already have this huge advantage. All I need to do to finish my development now is get my king castle, develop the bishop, develop the knight. He has a lot of stuff to deal with. To continue, I'm just going to continue with my development. I could play a natural development move like knight f3 or castle. These are perfectly playable development moves, but I'm going to develop a piece and create a threat at the same time. So if you could develop a piece and create a threat at the same time, I'm threatening mate on f7. It's like development 2.0 because you're doing what you needed to do anyways. So the opponent now has to be careful. He has to play something like queen e8 or queen e7. He has to guard the f7 square. So he found it. He played queen to e8. And usually when we're ahead in material, we want to be trading queens. But remember what I told you guys. If you have an attack on the opponent's king, if the opponent's king is weak, do not trade the queens. Keep the queens on the board. So I'm actually going to keep the queens on the board in this position. Let's pull the queen back to g3. He's also able to play h4 in this position and attack my queen, but then I'm just going to move the queen. The goal is to, I just spoke to one of my students who don't like to trade queens, and what I've been telling him is, if you're hidden material, you should trade the queens off the board. The only time you don't trade the queens off the board is if you have an attack on the king. So he plays this move to attack my queen. Let's play queen to f3. The queen is now on the same line as the opponent's king, so he has to be a bit careful. And even though he's down in material, I think the best thing for him to do in this position is to still try to get the queens off the board. For example, moves like queen to h5 is something that he could consider here. But instead, he plays pawn a6. Pawn a6, it looks like he's trying to play b5, but he needs to get his pieces out. Like, the guy's just not developing his pieces. Let me get my king out the center of the board. Let me just get my king out the center of the board. Remember, the goal is to try to move every single piece. I was expecting him to play this move, pawn to b5. And my next move is actually going to be a very nice move. I'm actually going to put my bishop on b5. knowing that he's able to play pawn to c6. But why I'm going to be putting my bishop on d5, this is called inducing a weakness. Remember that thing, what I did with the queen, where I purposely put the queen on g4 so that way he plays g6, and then purposely put the bishop on g5 so that way he plays f6, and eventually he blundered his pawn? I'm going to play bishop to d5 so that way if he moves the c pawn, the d6 square is no longer guarded. That way, I'm going to be able to play moves like bishop to e3, checking the king. He's not going to be able to play d6, otherwise I'm going to take, and then it's going to be a very strong attack on his king. So he did play pawn to c6. Now we're going to be continuing with our plan. Our development is not fully complete. Our knight is still not yet developed. But because the guy literally has no piece past his seventh rank, we could actually start our attack without even developing our knight. But let's start with the plan. Let's go bishop to c5 check. In this position, blocking with the knight would be losing, completely losing. That would just be game because the knight is covering the f6 pawn. And if he moves the knight, the queen takes the f6 pawn, and that's a checkmate. So he has to play the move king to g7, but my opponent decided to play knight f7, and I'll show you guys the checkmate. Notice how the knight no longer guards the pawn on f6. This is called the drawback principle. This is how most people blunder, especially below 1,000. Because the knight is no longer guarding the pawn, queen takes f6 is just a check. The king has nowhere to move. It's not a mate though because his queen is able to block. But once the queen is blocked, we take on f7, and that's just going to be a checkmate. So let's just take on f6 with check, forcing the opponent to react to this move. And once he blocks with the queen, that's just a checkmate. More Vienna game at the 700 level. Stick around. Opponent is now 700. More Vienna coming your way. E5, we go knight c3. And if he plays knight f6, that's the Vienna gambit. Knight c6 was played, however. So this is the Vienna game. Against the Vienna game, we should play bishop to c4. Against the Vienna gambit, we should play f4. So bishop c5 was played. Let's just, oh, if they play bishop to c5, and this is something that you guys can also find on chessrefs.com, because I try to ensure that I learn all the lines before I make these videos. Whenever the bishop goes to c5, we play queen to g4 because the bishop no longer covers this g7 square. So now he has to play some weird moves in order to defend the g7 square. For example, pawn to g6 or king to f8. But let's see how he's going to choose to defend g7. Okay, he plays queen to f6. There's actually a trap here that I just learned when I was going through the lines. If they play queen to f6, thinking, okay, I'm just going to take on f2 and I'm defending my pawn on g7, we're actually going to allow them to take on f2. It's crazy. We're going to play the move knight to d5. Knight d5 hits the queen and threaten the c7 pawn with check. If he takes on f2 thinking, what is this guy doing? I'm just going to take on f2. This is going to be leading to a checkmate. No, black is actually the one who is losing in this position. Because if the queen goes back to d8, we take on g7. If the queen goes to d6, we take on d7. If the queen goes to g6, we fork and we win the rook. Queen to g6 was played. We spoke about this though. He's about to lose an entire rook. So this is like the first trap of the Vienna, where we take on c7 with check. We're just forking the rook and the king. The king now has to move. Now, once he moves the king, obviously we're not going to take the rook because we're about to lose our queen. But once we take the queen first we take the queen, trade the queens off the board. Now we take the rook, and we're just ahead by an entire rook. This is the first trap. In the Vienna game, there's also the Vienna gambit that has a bunch of traps as well. Now the goal from here is to start trading. Knight f6 hits e4. I mean, I'm trying to develop anyway, so let's play pawn to d3. And in theory, we should lose this knight. But even if we lose the knight, we're still doing fine. But we should lose the knight in theory. So if we're able to not lose this knight by pulling our knight back out, then it's just an entire free rook. So knight to d4 was played. c2 is under attack. I was thinking of king d1, but let's just pull the bishop back to b3. Now, the reason why I was hesitant in playing bishop to b3 is because I'm like, bishops are better than knights and all of that stuff, but I'm ahead by an entire rook, so it really doesn't matter if he takes my bishop. In fact, I want him to take my bishop because the more pieces we trade off the board, the easier it's going to be to see my advantage. So he plays pawn to d6. Still no way to prevent me from just getting my knight back out. And I think he wants to play bishop to e6. And then if I take, he takes on c2. With that being said, we're going to be playing knight to c7, bringing our knight back out. And if the bishop goes to e6, we just take on e6. Otherwise, we need to finish developing these minor pieces. So he pulls the bishop back to attack the knight. Let's just play knight to d5 here. The goal is to trade as much pieces as possible off the board. So if he takes our knight, we're just going to take back with the pawn, not the bishop. He plays bishop to e6. And because the goal is to trade, let's just play knight to e2. I'm just going to take his knight on d4 on the next move, regardless of what he plays. Well, not really. Because if he plays bishop takes, I may have to take the bishop back first. So he took with the knight. Let's take with the pawn, hit the bishop. The bishop now has to move. Okay, he didn't move the bishop. That was just bad. Because, okay, that looks like a free bishop, but if I take, my bishop no longer guards c2. Those are drawback mistakes. However, what happens if I take his knight first? If I take his knight first and he takes my knight, then I take the bishop for free. But then if I take the knight and his bishop takes my bishop, then the same knight takes on b3 and I'm doing fine. So let's just take the knight. That's another piece for us, which is why he plays bishop takes g2, hits the rook. Let's just play rook to g1 here, hit the bishop. And if he plays rook takes h2 to guard the bishop, it's going to be giving me some time to move away my knight. So we're still ahead by two pieces, one of them being a rook. So this is just GG's. We're just converting our advantage from here. It's very important that you guys know how to convert an advantage, because I've had a lot of students who they get winning position, but they're not able to win the game, which is kind of sad. My knight is under attack. We have to move the knight. Let's just put the knight on f3. Bishop here is not possible. Bishop to e3 is my next move because I'm just trying to trade every single piece off the board. f5. Let's just continue. f5 didn't do anything. We're just trying to trade. That's the plan. Let's take back. The more pieces that we're able to trade, the closer and closer the game is getting to an end. He plays e4. Let's just take. Once the pawn takes, I'm going to play knight g5, hit the bishop, third knight e6, third knight f7. This is just GG's. He took with the pawn. Let's go knight g5, hit the bishop. I'm also trying to castle my king so that way my a rook comes to f1. So he pulls the bishop back. Let's castle. I'm hitting this pawn. He moves the king to f7. Oh, there's also a very nice tactic here. I'm able to sacrifice my rook on d6. It looks as if I'm losing a rook, but it's actually an attraction sacrifice. Because if his king takes my rook, I'm going to be able to, well, he resigns. More Vienna against 800 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 800. We're still going to be playing more Vienna game. E5, we play knight c3, and then we have them decide if it's going to be a Vienna game or a Vienna gambit. He decided that he wants it to be a Vienna gambit, so let's play pawn to f4 in this position. D5, correct move. After d5, we take on e5, attacking the knight. Now, after knight e4, it's very important that we play the move queen to f3 in this position. If you're going to be playing the Vienna gambit, you have to understand these ideas because you are slightly weakening this diagonal, pointing towards your king. What we want them to do is just to take on c3. Knight to c6 is one of those tricky lines where if you take on e4, the knight comes to d4 and attack your queen. But to just prevent all of this, you just need to play bishop to b5, pinning the knight to the king, and then you're safe. Now we're still threatening to take on e4. So if his knight take on c3, we take back with the pawn and continue with our regular setup, where we take, play d4, and attack them on the king side. One thing I want you guys to keep in mind is the f file is usually where most of the action will take place in the Vienna game. So he took on c3. Let's take back. All of these lines that you guys seeing me playing, it's what I do is I went to chess reps, learned the lines. If you want chess reps, link in description. And then after I learned the lines, then I'm playing the lines. So you guys need to ensure that after you watch this video, you learn all the lines. And then once you start applying them in your games, it's going to be like second nature. Because on chess reps, you learn your space repetition. And then from these videos, you actually cement the ideas and know the plans. So he plays bishop to e6. Now we play pawn to d4. We're going to be playing moves like knight e2, castle or king. This bishop on b5, if you could get your bishop back to d3,
That's a better diagonal for your bishop. We usually put the bishop on b5 just to pin the knight and ensure that the knight does not come down. But if he plays moves like pawn a6 before you play d4, then you could simply take the knight and play d4. So a6 was played. We're not going to be taking the knight. Let's pull back to d3. This bishop is too important for us to give it up for a knight. Our next two moves we're going to be getting castled. And this rook on a1 could be put to work on b1 if you need the rook to go somewhere. A lot of the times your bishop is going to stay on c1. So don't feel bad if you're not developing your bishop, or don't feel bad if your bishop is one of the last piece to be developed. Okay. That was a very creative try, but it doesn't. I see what he's trying to do. He just sacrificed his knight. And then once I take the knight, I guess he's going to play queen check. And if I play king to d1, he pins my queen. But who says I'm going to play king to d1? Okay, if I play g3, he's going to hit my rook. With that being said, I'm going to play queen to g3. Block the check with the queen so that way my e5 pawn is guarded. So that way, once the queen takes, I'm able to play rook to b1. Everything is guarded. I'm ahead by a piece. And then I'm going to be able to play moves like knight to f3 or knight e2, hit the queen. So queen takes d4. My rook is under attack. Let's just play rook to b1. It doesn't mean that I'm completely winning though, but an extra piece is definitely good enough to win the entire game. Bishop to b5 check would be the most annoying move. Because if bishop to b5 check, I'm not able to block with the pawn. And then if I block with the bishop, he takes, then my king is not able to get castled, which is fine. Or after bishop to b5 check, another thing I could do is just move my king out the way and then play knight to e2 or knight f3 and attack his queen. Either way, I'm doing fine. Remember what I told you guys about the Vienna? It's like you have to ensure that you're careful about this diagonal pointing towards your king. Always be ready for them to try to exploit these diagonals pointing towards the king. He decides to castle on the queen side. Now I'm just going to continue with my plan. I'm thinking knight f3, knight e2 I like, because I don't want my queen to be out of what's happening over here. So knight e2 hits the queen, bishop to b5 check, maybe just move my king somewhere, and I guess it's going to be hard for the queen to guard the bishop. Queen c5, bishop e3. Let's go knight e2. We have to complete our development at the end of the day. Bishop to b4 check is still a move here, unless he just moves the queen. Not sure where he's going to move the queen though, because it wouldn't make sense for him to try to trade the queens right after he sacrificed a knight. Okay, he puts his queen all the way back to a7. It's kind of a passive square for a queen. Definitely kind of a passive square for a queen. I'm thinking about bishop to e3, hit the queen. So I guess he's going to play bishop c5, and then I'm going to trade, and then I'm going to be happy with that trade. Yeah, let's go bishop e3. He could also play pawn c5. Pawn c5 is not a bad move, by the way, because it threatens some c4 or d4 stuff. Well, not c4, because the pawn is going to be pinned, but it threatens d4 stuff. So I have to be careful. If he plays pawn c5, though, I could say his queen is not too active anymore. Okay, he plays pawn to d4 to attack my bishop. And this bishop is attacking my pawn. That was not a bad move. And if I takes, queen takes, that's a good trade for him. With that being said, I'm going to play bishop to g5 and attack his rook. So that way I keep the tempo and the initiative. And then I'm just going to castle my king on the king side and then try to start an attack on his queen side. So I'm assuming he's going to move his rook. There's no f6 or bishop e7 here. So he's going to he's going to move his rook. The good thing is his queen is slightly out of the game because nobody should be comfortable with a queen on a7. So he plays rook to e8. Let's get our king out the center of the board. All our pieces are active. All our pieces are developed. We are ready to start our attack on his king. In the Vienna, most of the action takes place on the F file, but his king is over here. So most of the action is going to be taking place on the B file. I'm thinking of bishop e4, applying some pressure here. The queen is on the same line as my king, though, so I have to be a bit careful. He puts the queen back on c5, getting the queen back in the game. Let's play king to h1, so that way, if I have to move my bishop, there's no discovered attack. Remember what I keep telling you guys, a move like king to h1 is a very good prophylactic move in the Vienna game. Now, bishop takes was played. The reason why I was not so like I didn't really care too much about losing this pawn is because he's actually allowing me to get more files pointing towards his rook. Now I'm able to play moves like rook to a1. That's a file pointing towards his king. I'm able to sack my bishop in the future. Once he moves his bishop, I'm able to swing the other rook over to the G file, and then I have two rooks pointing towards this king, and that has to be problematic. Another idea that I have is to simply check on G4, hit the king, take on D4, which is winning. Bishop back to E4 prevented that. So let's just play rook to B1 now. Both of my rooks are pointing towards where his king resides. So we're definitely in good shape here. Now, I want you guys to keep in mind, when it comes to attacking, you want to be attacking the pawns around the opponent's king. So this B7 point has to be the main target. So queen to F3, bishop to E4, all of these moves pointing towards B7 is good. Sacrificial ideas also makes some sense. Okay, bishop to F4. I guess he wants to trade. So check takes is just completely winning. Queen F3, I'm considering to apply pressure here. Queen F3, bishop here, then I'm able to go bishop E4, and that's more pressure on B7. So before I go for this trade, let's go queen to F3, applying some pressure to his B7 pawn. So he pulls the bishop back to D5. This is what I was seeing. Then I'm going to put my bishop on E4, which means I'm threatening to take his bishop. But then if he takes my bishop and I take back, I'm now threatening to take on B7. So he took, let's take here. My E5 pawn is under attack twice. I'm only guarding it once, but B7 is actually the main target here. So he has to play something like pawn to C6. After pawn C6, I'm thinking of knight takes D4 to sack on C6, but my E5 pawn is going to be in trouble. So let's go bishop to F4 first. Let's protect the pawn. And then knight takes D4 could follow. So he plays f5 to attack my queen. That's just a pawn. Let's take the pawn, hit the king. The king has to move. He puts his king on the same diagonal as my bishop. So pushing my pawn to e6 could definitely be a plan. But my fellow viewers, his weak b7 pawn. Can I sack? Takes, check. Once the king move, I grab the rook. And this will lead to a checkmate. Let's sacrifice the rook. Because once the king takes, his rook is unprotected. Remember what I told you guys about unprotected pieces? That's what causes tactics in a position. Check. If he puts his king here, I may check him on B1 first. But if he goes back, then I'll take the rook with check. It's all about the tempo. It's all about keeping the tempo. So because he puts his king here, we play rook to B1 check, forcing the king to move. It's all about the tempo. He moves the king, any more checks? Maybe check him here. He goes here, then check here. He goes here, then check here. He goes here. So that doesn't work. So let's check here. Let's ensure that our bishop covers this square first. So the king has to go here. If I now check here, if he blocks with the queen, we win the queen. If the king goes here, we take here with check. No. If the king goes here, we check and pick up the queen. Yeah, let's check here. You see, the rook is hanging. We're not in any rush to take the rook. The king goes here. We could check here, but the king goes here. We could check here. Okay. We check here. If the king goes here, that's mate. If he blocks with the queen, we check here. And then after the king moves, we take the queen for free. So that's the move. That's the move. The king is now forced. Well, it's not forced, he could play whatever he wants. But if the king goes here, he decided to block with the queen. This is called a skewer and removing the guard. The queen and the king is on the same line. The king is the only defender of the queen. So once I check him on B1, if he could block with the bishop, but I'll just take the bishop. So technically, he is forced to move the king. And then once he moves the king, I'll take the queen and I'm winning the game. He moves the king, we take the queen, king has to move, we take on D4. It's not a checkmate, but the guy only has like 0 seconds on his clock. With that being said, we're going to be using the Vienna game against players at 900 level. Stick around. Our opponent is now 900. Let's go E4. E5, we play knight C3, and then we wait to see if it's going to be a Vienna game or a Vienna gambit. He chose his Vienna gambit. Let's play F4. And one thing I want to tell you guys, persons at the lower level will play knight F6, not knowing that they're choosing to play the Vienna gambit. For example, knight C6 is already immediately losing because what I'm going to be doing now is just force his knights around the board. For example, I'm going to take on E5, hit this knight, And then once the knight takes back, I mean, it looks normal. It looks like I'm just developing my knight. I'm just taking back the pawn. But now I'm just going to be having this massive center. So d4, hit the knight. The knight has to move. And I want you guys to keep in mind, this is the actual position that players play in order to get the Halloween gambit, where you have to sacrifice a knight to get this position. I'm able to get this position without sacrificing a knight. He pulls the knight back to c6. Now I'm going to play pawn to e5, attacking this knight. The knight is not able to move forward, so he has to pull the knight back to the background. So not only is he moving this knight more than once over and over, he also has to pull this knight to the background. I have seen persons try queen to e7 just to pin here, but if queen c7, e7, I'm just going to play bishop e2. He still has to pull his knight back. He decides to pull the knight back. Let's go bishop to c4, developing, not allowing pawn to d5. The goal is to develop our knight, castle, or king, target the weak f pawn, because the f file is where the action happens. He develops his bishop, and I'm already thinking of playing bishop, well, queen to g4, because that's an idea that I learned on chess reps, where they're like, once the bishop develops, g7 is no longer guarded. So you go queen g4, hit the pawn. Yeah, let's try that. Let's go qg4, hit the pawn. Usually when the bishop comes to c5, you could play queen g4, hit the pawn. Otherwise, knight e2, knight f3 is also fine. Now, one thing you need to be careful of while putting your queen on g4 to hit the pawn is that this bishop is on the same line as your queen. So we need to be a bit careful. But if he tries to move the pawn, let's say d5, thinking he's winning material, we're going to take on g7, which will be attacking his rook. Okay, he plays d6. The bishop attacks my queen. Yeah, he's really not seeing what's about to hit him. Queen takes g7, first of all, is a free pawn. But not only am I attacking the guy's rook, my fellow peeps, I'm also threatening a checkmate on f7. These are the stuff that happens when you know what you're doing in the Vienna game. And I don't want you guys to only use these types of videos that I'm making to only learn the openings. I want you guys to use the principles and apply it in your middle game. He took a pawn on d4, and that's just a free rook. No, I'm just joking. That's just a checkmate. But more Vienna game at the 1000 level. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1000. More Vienna game coming your way. So now we play knight c3 and we wait. Are we getting Vienna game or Vienna gambit? He plays knight c3. That's an indication that it's going to be a Vienna game. Let's go bishop c4. Knight f6. Now, one thing I realized while training this on chess reps is if you play knight e2, knight takes e4 is good for black. So you have to play d3. It's the same thing. Don't allow them to sack here. You're just not going to put the knight on f3 unless you put your pawn on f4. So bishop to b4 pins the knight. We usually always want to play moves like knight e2, supporting the pin that's happening here. We're going to castle the king. We're going to play f4. This is the Vienna game. Okay, pawn to d5, I wasn't expecting. Definitely wasn't expecting such an early pawn to d5. But we should be able to just take on d5 here. Now, because the opponent plays pawn d5 this quickly, we don't necessarily need to play f4. So let's just get the king out the center of the board. For example, a move like knight to g3 afterwards will be better. So if he takes with the knight, that's actually good for us, which he did take with the knight, because now we're actually able to take with the pawn, not the knight. Taking with the pawn, you could say it gained time on the bishop, forcing the bishop to move. And then once the bishop moves, we're going to be continuing with our attack. So bishop went back to d6, and I remember vividly this knight to g3 moves. It's very important that we point our pieces towards the opponent's king side, because it's very likely that he's going to castle on the king side. Now, the king is castled, still not seeing any value to play f4 here. Let's just play queen to h5. Queen to h5, we'll put the queen on his half of the board. And we're basically seeing is if he plays g6, he's weakening the dark squares around this king. That's what I'm trying to say. So pawn g6, queen h6, ideas of bishop g5, knight e4, trying to jump into f6. He doesn't necessarily have to play g6 too. Like, you should not be moving pawns on the side that your king is on unless you're forced. Okay, this has to be bad. The guy just plays h6. Everybody knows me. Like, if you know me, you know the move that I'm going to play here. I'm also not going to think about it. Let's just sacrifice the bishop. Let's sack the bishop. Now let's start thinking about it. If he takes my bishop, we don't take on h6 because we want to take on h6 with check. So if he takes the bishop, we're actually going to play queen to g6 check because the f pawn is not able to take. And then after the, ooh, ah, queen to g6. He didn't see this one because the pawn is pinned. The king now has to move, and then I'm going to be able to take on h6 with a check. You see, I told you guys, do not push pawns on the side that your king is on. Queen to h5, he actually didn't need to do all of that. He really didn't need to do all of that. Once the king move and I take and he puts the king back, I'm just going to hit him with knight to h5 and then walk away from the chessboard because it's just GG's. So he moves the king. We take on h6. King has to go here. Knight h5 is GG's. Because I'm going to be threatening a checkmate on g7, and I'm going to be threatening to win his queen on f6. And there is just no way for him to prevent this. So the king moves over to g3. Watch this. Knight h5. There's no way to prevent a knight from going to g7. No way. There's no queen going to f6. There's no queen going to g5. There's no bishops coming in. I could even pre-move queen g7 because queen g7 on the next move is just a checkmate. And it's crazy because when I was training this line on chess reps, I saw the whole knight g3 idea, but now I see why the knight goes to g3 because of knight to h5, attacking these squares around the king. Well, the opponent resigns. More Vienna, the 1100 region. Stick around. Our opponent is now in the 1100 region. More Vienna coming your way. e5 was played. Now we play knight c3. Let black determine if it's a Vienna game or a Vienna gambit. He choose the Vienna gambit. Now we play pawn to f4, gambiting the pawn. If they take, hit them with e5, and that's just winning. And by the way, whenever people play knight f6, I say this a lot. It's not unless they play d5, they know what to do. Otherwise, them playing knight f6, allowing the gambit, they could just be losing immediately. For example, taking on f4, is losing because once they take, I'm able to hit him with e5. The knight has no forward moves. And because the knight has no forward moves, the knight has to go all the way back to g8. So the knight went back. Let's just play knight to f3 here. Very important move, by the way, because remember, being a Vienna player, you have to pay attention to this diagonal. So knight to f3, it guards the diagonal. It develops the knight. Pawn d4 is coming next. And from here, it's just regular development. And we're already ahead by like two tempi. And we're playing with the white pieces. Pawn to d6 was played. After pawn to d6, I like the idea of queen to e2. There's a lot of threats and traps that could happen if the opponent plays this d6 move. I'm not gonna lie, a move like pawn to d4 seems to be more principled here. Like we protect the pawn. If he takes, we actually take with the knight. Our bishop is able to take on f4. So let's just not try to win quickly and use the fact that we're already having this massive lead in development and just finish our development. Bishop to g4 was played. Usually the moment when they play a move like bishop g4, we want to put the question to them. Okay, that was not a bad move. I think taking here would have been just a bit better. Because now after takes queen h4. You see, I warned you guys about this diagonal. You have to keep this diagonal in mind. He pulls the bishop back though. So let's take on f4. Let's just take on f4 and finish with our development. Knight d7 was played. I mean, it develops the knight, it targets the center. So it's not a terrible move. There's nothing stopping me from just developing those. So let's just develop our pieces. That's all we're doing now. I mean, I could castle my king and my development will actually be complete. I'm also thinking of moves like queen e2, just castling on the queen side. So that way the attack on his king is going to be brutal. I don't think his king is going to be able to ever leave the center, to be honest. I mean, he's too much moves away from being developed. The opponent is having some issues with the king side development. Because if bishop here, there's nowhere for the knight. Queen to e7 was played. This is a thematic move to be aware of. Whenever you see them play this queen e7, if your knight is on b1, usually you want to play knight c3. But if your knight is already on c3, you hit them with knight to d5. We're already hitting the queen. The queen is now forced to just go back. The queen now just has to step back. So we're just completely preventing black from developing here. And we're just like one move away from being completely developed. Queen e6 blunders the queen, by the way. So the queen has to go back to d8. Now, once the queen goes back to d8, I like the idea of playing queen to e2 here. Queen to e2, also a thematic move in the Vienna. You put the queen on the same line as the opponent's king. I Before doing this video, I learned all the ideas on chessreps.com. Basically, what's happening is after c6, which he did, I was expecting that move, by the way, because my queen is on the same line as the opponent's king. I'm able to do a discovered attack. This is going to be so beautiful. Once my pawn takes with check, the opponent is now forced to block with something. And anything that he blocks with, I'm going to be able to take it. So let's take on d6 with check. Something has to block. Something has to block. And I'm going to be taking whatever black uses to block. And if he blocks with the knight, which he did, do we want the knight? No, because when we see a good move, we look for a better one. Knight c7. It's not a smothered mate, but we're smothering the opponent's king. And the only way how this move is actually not checkmate is because the queen on d8 is able to take. Now we take the queen, and we're ahead by a queen on move 15. From here, let's just get the king out the center of the board. Let's apply more pressure to this pin knight and easily win the game. Rook to c8 was played. My pawn is already guarded though, so let's just get the king out the game. I told you that there's no king leaving the center of the board if anyone accepts the Vienna gambit. Usually the best way to refute a gambit is by accepting the gambit or doing a counter gambit. In the Vienna, it's just not accepting the gambit. You just can't accept the Vienna gambit. He plays pawn to g6. It is a sign that he's trying to play moves like bishop to g7 and castle is king. But because of this g6 move, his bishop is not able to go back to g6. Pawn to g4 traps the bishop. The question is though, oh no, oh my, I'm about to trick him. Okay, guys, this is winning, right? So let's have some fun. The position is completely winning. Let's have some fun. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play the move knight to g5, and I'm going to be like, oh, my queen, I blundered my queen. But once I play knight to g5, he's gonna be like, wait, that's a queen. Akeem just blundered his queen. But that's not a blunder. He's actually not able to take the queen. Because if he dares to touch the queen, he's gonna be getting checkmated on the next move with the bishop takes f7. The question is though, how does he guard the f7 pawn? Like, let's say I'm not trying to trick the guy. Like, what move is he gonna play? Let's say my queen was not hanging, right? What move is he gonna play to guard the f7 pawn? This is just checkmate. I think knight g5 is a brilliant move. Has to be a brilliant move. And whenever you guys are leaving questions, remember to use timestamps. Knight to b6 was played. Hopefully, you're able to find the checkmate in two moves here. But the move in this position is bishop takes f7 with check. Moving the knight allows the opponent's king to move to d7, but queen to e6 is just a checkmate. So let's check on f7. The king now has to move to d7, and that's just a checkmate. More Vienna against 1200 rated players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1200. More Vienna coming your way. He plays e5. Let's go knight c3, knight c6, or knight to f6. Knight c6 means it's going to be a Vienna game. Let's go bishop to c4. And if they play bishop to c5, we go queen g4, something you can find on chess reps. But if he plays knight to f6, hits the pawn, we don't play knight e2 because there's the little forking trick. So we have to play d3 in order to protect d4. And then we should be able to play knight e2 on the next move. Now he plays h6, which means there's not going to be any bishop to g5, but there could be sacrificial ideas on h6. That being said, let's go knight e2. Let's continue with our idea. Plan is to get our king out the center of the board. b6 blocks in the bishop has to be an inaccuracy. Let's get our king out the center of the board. Now I'm assuming he's going to play bishop to e6. Makes some sense. Makes some sense. Bishop to e6. Now we play f4, continuing with the whole Vienna idea. And why I'm playing f4 is I'm allowing him to take on c4, so that way once I take on c4, there will never be any pawn to d5. He puts his bishop on e7, and another thematic idea that I want you guys to use when playing the Vienna game is pawn to f5. Because if he castles the king, for one, I'm going to have a massive attack on the king. Two, it's going to be hard for him to bring pieces over to defend this king. So he has to be careful. I think it's actually best for him to play queen d7 and castle on the queen side, but he chose to castle on the king side. Okay, the attack is coming. How do we start the attack? First of all, let's play bishop to e3. We want to play moves like queen to d2, sacrifice on h6. I have played someone who plays knight e7 followed by bishop g5. So that's actually not a bad plan, just getting rid of the bad piece. I think he had knight g4. Yeah, he could have played knight g4. He didn't. So let's play h3 to prevent knight g4. Don't be allowing your opponent to play knight g4. Now he plays a6. Look like he's trying to play b5, but I think he just has no respect for my attack that is coming in. So let's play queen to d2. My move is coming up. Pawn to b5. Let's calculate. First of all, let's take here so that way we don't lose the pawn. Takes, 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 right? After takes, 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 knight h7, knight h5 is winning. With that being said, I need the knight to be on g3 in order for this to work. So don't be sacrificing your bishop on h6 and then blaming me that you lost the game. Please be calculating. This is not I have no control over any of you guys' rating. Calculate before you do these types of sacrifices. Okay, I think he's gonna play b4. B4 makes a lot of sense. He plays queen to d7, which means without calculating, we actually did calculate. We takes, queen takes h6. If he moves the knight to h7, knight to h5, and there's nothing he could do to prevent queen to g7, which is gonna be a checkmate. I'm just not seeing what else he could play. Like takes. What if he plays knight e8? Knight e8 covers the g7 square. Knight e8, I should be able to play f6. Should be able to play f6. And then if bishop takes, and if knight takes, knight f5, let's take. Yeah, it's over now. So knight h7 is a confirmed loss. Knight to e8 covers the g7 square. So we have to cook a bit more. So knight e8, we play f6. Pawn takes f6, bishop takes f6. We sack the rook. Oh, he plays knight d4. He thinks he doesn't need to move the knight, and that's not a bad thought. Okay, so knight d5, get rid of the knight. Once he takes, we don't take back the knight. We hit him with knight h5, and that's going to be a mate. Let's go knight d5. This is called removing the guard, by the way. The move that we want to play is knight h5. So once his knight takes, we don't necessarily have to take back. Okay, he plays c6. So not only is he losing the knight, he's also getting checkmated because the knight is what we want to remove. So first we take the knight with check. The bishop has to take, but we don't take. Wait, do we take the bishop? Or do we play knight to h5? Taking the bishop is good, but I think knight to h5, yeah, knight h5 is better because I'm not threatening mate here, but I'm threatening mate here. And if the bishop moves, then I go here. But what if he pulls the bishop back to h8? Then I hit him with f6, no? Nah, I think we need to take the bishop. Knight h5. Nope, not taking the bishop. Knight h5 is the move. Because if the bishop, oh, I actually thought queen g5 was mate. I think he's able to pull the bishop back to h8. Yeah, he's able to pull the bishop back to h8. Backside, backside. Okay, pawn f6. What does this do? Pawn f6 does nothing. I need to get my rook in the game. But the knight is preventing my rook from joining the game. So I check here, the king goes here. So let's play c3. Worst case scenario, we could say we got back the knight. I think knight e2 check is something, but I'm just trying to get my rook to f3. Knight e2, we play king h2, and then he plays knight to f4. Knight to f4 is good for me though, because the goal is to get my rook in the game. And I'm already thinking of takes. There's bishop e5. Bucks. Okay, here's the move. Take on f4. We don't want the bishop to come to e5. So we play f6. We still do not have a mate because his bishop covers the dark squares. But once we get a rook anywhere on the g file with check, his bishop has to block and then it's going to be a checkmate. So it just requires a bit of patience now. If he sacks the bishop, now we're going to take the bishop. We're actually going to take the bishop if he sacks the bishop. Okay, he sacked the bishop. Let's not try to be too fancy. Let's take the bishop. We're gonna play rook f6. Okay, he's trying to trade the queens. We are not trading queens with this attack, sir. Let's just move our queen out the way. We're not gonna be trading queens with this attack. We're gonna take on f4 and we're gonna swing the rook over. Not trading any queens. But I really should have took the bishop, man. Like, if I had taken the bishop, it definitely could have been a checkmate years ago. So he took a free pawn. Let's take on f4. Rook to g4 is just going to be a checkmate, unless he plays queen to e5, which pins my rook. But if he plays queen to e5, I go rook here. Now that he plays queen to h7, here's what I think this is checkmate in three moves. Otherwise, he has to sack his queen. So rook to g4 check first. He has to block with the queen. Because he didn't block with the queen, I'm now able to play queen to f6 check. The king is not able to move. The queen has to go to g7, and queen takes g7 is going to be a checkmate. So let's go queen to f6. He blocks with the queen, and that's a checkmate. More Vienna at the 1300 level. Stick around. Opponent is now 1300. Let's play 4. And let's play the Vienna. Are we going to be getting a Vienna game or a Vienna gambit? It all depends on black. Because he plays knight to f6, it's going to be a more fun Vienna gambit with f4, but d5 is the correct way to play against the Vienna gambit. Now, after d5, it's very important that we play the move pawn takes, so that way we're forcing the opponent knight to move more than once in the opening stage of the game. Now, once the knight takes, because the queen is now able to get access to the h4 diagonal, we're going to be playing the move queen to f3, applying more pressure to his knight, forcing him to move the knight again. Knight to c6 is actually one of the very tricky ways to play, because he's actually threatening to play knight to d4, which will attack my queen, and threaten c2 at the same time. We don't want to be able to allow his knight to get to the d4 square, though. So we're going to be developing our bishop to b5, pinning the knight. This is a very important idea for you guys to know. Now that he takes on c3, let's just take on c3. We're still going to be playing the move pawn to d4. We're still going to be playing the move knight e2. And it's just our regular development. So he plays bishop e7. Let's just play d4 here. He castles the king. Now we go knight to e2. The plan from here is to castle our king. Bishop to d7 was a mistake, because he puts the bishop on d7, but then the queen is no longer guarding the pawn on d5. That's a drawback mistake. Now, once I take this pawn, if he moves the bishop, I just move my queen. If he moves the knight, I take the bishop. So that's just a free pawn. From here, I'm going to castle my king, and everything is going to be fine. So a6 was played to attack my bishop. We're definitely not going to be giving up a bishop for a knight. On d3 is where the bishop belongs anyways, pointing towards this h7 pawn. Remember, it's very important for us to be pointing our pieces towards the opponent's king. So if he plays something like bishop e6 here, we don't have to trade queens, even though we're ahead by a pawn. We could play queen to e4, so that way we have two pieces pointing towards h7, and it's not to threaten like a cheaper checkmate. It is actually to force the opponent to create weaknesses around the king. So he did play bishop to e6. Let's pull the queen back to e4. We're threatening checkmate on h7, so he is forced to play pawn to g6. And then after pawn to g6, there's really a lot of ways in which we could continue. Like there's bishop h6 hitting the rook. We could just castle. He did play g6. There's also knight to f4 hitting the bishop. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. First, I'm going to go bishop to h6, attacking the rook. He is able to try bishop to d5 or bishop to f5. He chose bishop to f5. His rook is still under attack though, but I am forced to move my queen out the way. So let's just put the queen on f3, maintaining the pressure on the f file. His rook is now under attack, which means if he tries to take my bishop, I'm wait, wait. Let's calculate. Let's calculate. He takes 3 points, I take 5 points. He takes three more points, I take three more points. He takes 9 points, I take 9 points. He takes 1 point, I attack his 3 point. And if he takes my 3 points, I take his 3 points. And then I'm left with two rooks, and he's left with a rook and a bishop. Am I correct? I'm not sure if I'm correct, but that would mean that I'm winning. Okay, so he just took 3 points. I take five. He takes three. I take three. He takes nine. I take nine. He takes one. Hit the bishop. If he moves the bishop, I take more. Or I could just take here. Once the rook move, I castle. Certain f7. Wait. Wait. How does he guard f7? Okay, taking the rook is winning. But if I take, he moves the rook and I castle. How does he guard the f7 pawn? He has to move the F pawn. And then I take the bishop, hit the bishop third and fourth. Let's just take here. When you see a good move, what do you do when you see a good move? You look for a better one. It's over now. Keep in mind, in the Vienna game, most of the action, my fellow peeps, happens on the F file. There's no way for black to guard the F pawn. There's no queen d5. Maybe he's going to put the rook back on f8. It's funny because I think putting the rook back on f8 is the best move. And then I'm just going to take the rook and then I'm just winning. Because if f6 I takes, hit the bishop, f7 is coming. Whoa. He plays f6, but we spoke about f6. Wait. If I takes, bishop takes, queen takes, rook takes, wait. F6 takes, bishop takes. I'm actually not able to take the bishop. That's nice. Because if I takes, bishop takes, queen takes, rook takes, he takes, and then I'm able to double up on the F file, threatening mate. Yeah, let's go further. Let's go a bit further. He is forced to pull the rook back to e8 to prevent the mate. And then I go rook to f7, threatening rook to g7. He's not able to move the rook. The knight is not able to defend. And my threat is to check king over and double up on the seventh rank. I think it works. It's crazy. I think it works. But you have to be able to see very, very deep. We take the pawn, he takes, we trade, double up on the F file, and this bishop on h6, rook to f8, checkmating threat idea is actually a pattern that you need to know. Especially if you're going to be playing the Vienna, you need to know this pattern because I've actually done this. I think it's the game against the 1700 guy, if I'm not lying, but I'm not sure. Okay, he decided to pull the bishop back. So this is just GG's. I'm gonna check. It's called a fork, by the way. The pawn hits the king and the rook. The king has to go to h8. Then I take the rook. Now I have two queens on the board. And then once the queen takes, I'm gonna play the move queen to f6 check because the queen no longer guards the f6 square. He has to block with the bishop, and then queen g7 is gonna be a checkmate. So pawn f7 check. It's called a fork. He resigns. More Vienna game against 1400 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1400. More Vienna game. E5, knight c3, Vienna game, Vienna gambit. He chose Vienna game. So let's go bishop to c4. And then after he plays knight to f6, do not play knight e2. You need to play f3 first. Well, d3. Play d3 because they're threatening to take on e4. So let's play d3, guarding the pawn. And then after a move like bishop to c5, now we play knight to e2. The goal from here is just to castle our king. This guy's playing fast. He plays d6. He's actually playing it exactly like how you'd play the Italian game, which is not dead wrong. Let's just castle our king here. The good thing is there's no pin. And that's what he's... Oh, it is actually pinned, but it doesn't do much. That's the thing. It doesn't do much because I'm able to play moves like h3, chasing away his bishop. He maintains the pin though, and now I'm thinking of playing g4. Is he trying to play knight d4 and apply pressure to my pin knight? Because that doesn't work. Wait, that does not work. So let's just ignore that and pin his knight instead. The thing is, his king is not yet castled, and I'm pinning his knight. So he's actually using Italian game theory against me. So, oh, if I maintain the pressure, he's actually going to be playing g5. And if I go back, he plays g4. Let's play bishop e3. Now, this player looks like he watched my Italian game video. So he castled his king. Now we're going to play the move queen to d2, getting out of the spin. And you guys already know what is coming if he does not do something to prevent this sack. Like, if he don't take my bishop, I will be sacrificing on h3. Okay, he took this. Why did he take this knight? I'm not sure. Let's just take back. Still threatening to sack. Maybe he wants to play d5, but it loses his bishop. All he needs to do is take my bishop, and it's a normal regular game. If he takes my bishop, it's a normal regular game, and then I'm gonna have to play moves like knight to g3, knight to f5, and then try to checkmate him on the g7 square. So he plays king to h7 because he predicts the sacrifice coming. But I mean, he could have just took on e3 if he didn't want me to sack. Let's continue with our idea though. We could either play f4 or knight to g3 here. I like the idea of knight to g3 because my knight could get to the f5 square and then he pulls his knight back to g8. He's like, hey, you are not sacrificing anything on h6. Now I'm thinking of just playing f4 or just take Double up his pawns, then play f4, and then yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Let's take on c5 first, doubling up his pawns, and then we play pawn to f4. Now we're going to continue with our attack on the f file. You could say he's able to put his knight on d4, but from d4, his knight is not really doing much, and I'm able to play c3, chasing away his knight. Now, if he plays queen d4, hits my king, and attack b2, I move the king, takes on b2, rook b1, hits the queen has to move, take back my pawn, and I'm fine. Then he plays f6. He's creating a lot of light square weaknesses around this king. Things may not end well for him, creating all those light square weaknesses, especially since he doesn't have a light squared bishop. And I'm the only one with a light squared bishop. I'm not going to take though. I want to get more pieces in the game. Is it knight f5? Is it knight f5? Let's go knight f5. Let's go knight f5. Let's see what's up. A6. Maybe he's trying to play b5. If takes, knight takes, I don't have much. I'm trying to target this pawn right here. So let's play rook to f3. This is called a rook lift, getting my rook in the game. b5 I was expecting, but it doesn't really do much because bishop to d5 is actually a very strong move. I'm pinning the knight to the rook. If he moves the knight, he loses the rook. If he plays knight e7, thinking he's guarding the knight and attacking, he's also losing. He kind of had to play queen to d7. Now I'm able to take because he's not able to play knight takes. Takes, has to play pawn takes, then rook to g6 hits the pawn. If he pushes the pawn, I get rid of the knight, take on h6, and that's GG's, right? So let's take on e5. If knight takes, we take the rook, so we're winning. If pawn takes, my rook swoops over and attack g7. So now I have two pieces on g7. He also has two pieces on g7, but that's two very heavy pieces. The question is, how is he going to apply more defense to g7? I'm not seeing that. Maybe he's going to push the pawn. But if he pushes the pawn, he's no longer guarding h6. And I have two pieces on h6, and he has two pieces on h6. But I'm able to get rid of one of the pieces that is guarding h6. Oh, he did play g6. It is over now because the knight guards h6. Bishop takes h6. This is called removing the guard. If he takes with the rook, that's a checkmate. If he takes with the king, I take on g6. The king is also the only defender of g6. He takes with the rook. That's a checkmate. More Vienna game at the 1500 level. Stick around. My opponent is now 1500. Let's keep learning the Vienna. Knight c3, Vienna game, Vienna gambit, Vienna Gambit it is. He develops the knight. We hit him with f4 with the whole idea of if they take, we play e5. The correct move here is d5. And remember, if they play d5, you have to ensure that you're equipped on how to work this. After d5, you take on e5, hit the knight. You can learn all of these lines on chessreps.com and then you apply it in your games, by the way. But after knight takes, we go queen to f3, hit the knight, applying more pressure to the knight. The tricky move is knight c6. Usually, when you see knight c6 in the Vienna, you play bishop b5 and pin it. Because if knight c6 and we take on e4, they will play knight d4 and hit the queen. Knight takes c3 was played. We're going to play b takes c3. The plan from here is to play d4. We know exactly what is happening. After knight c6, which is not the correct move, remember they need to play moves like c5 because once we play d4, this is just a very nice pawn chain to have. And remember some stuff that you guys need to keep in mind. For example, dark squared bishop and this rook are usually the last piece to join the game. It doesn't mean that you're not going to bring these pieces in the game, but we want to play moves like, for example, after bishop e6, we want to play moves like bishop to d3. This is like the perfect diagonal for the light squared bishop. After bishop to d3, we play knight to d2. And as we know, the action will take place on the f file. Whenever they play queen d2, I'm not sure if they have the idea of playing bishop g4, but it's not something to be worried about. Let's just go knight e7. Also, if they castle on the queen side, it means we will be playing moves like rook to b1 to start an attack on their king. Bishop to g4 was played. Again, it doesn't create any huge threats. We really just need to move the queen out the way, unless he's planning on giving up the bishop for the knight. But I'm just going to castle on the next move. Move the knight to g3 or f4. Based on my experience, the knight usually goes to g3, and then we chase away the bishop from our half of the board. One more thing that you guys want to keep in mind is if the king castle on the queen side, the queen and the king is going to be on the same diagonal. So getting this bishop to go anywhere back to h5, he could be running into a pin on his queen. Okay, so he did castle on the queen side. Let's castle on the king side. We're automatically attacking the f7 pawn, by the way, with two pieces. He's only guarding it with one piece. And as we said, all of the action is going to be taking place. Well, no, if the king is castled on the queen side, all the action will not necessarily take place on the f file. Most of the action may take place on the b file, but exactly what we spoke about happened. This guy's 1500, by the way. We're not making this up. He pulls the bishop back to h5 to guard f7. We know about the drawback principle. The guy did not ask his bishop what was it doing on this diagonal, and because he didn't talk to his piece, I'm able to hit him with bishop to f5, pinning the queen to the king. And just like that, in 12 moves, playing the Vienna Gambit, we're already winning. He took on e2, doesn't change anything at all. We could take the queen, but we could also just take back on e2. I mean, him trading is just helping us. Our rook still guards the bishop, by the way. I know that my queen no longer guards, but I'm thinking of moves like rook b1, queen b5 to attack the focal point on d4. He plays knight takes d4. He's basically giving me more pieces before I take the queen. Because for one, I could just take the queen with check. Let's just take the knight. Like, no need to rush. There's nothing you could do to get out of this pen. It's just GG's. If I was him though, I'd probably just resign. Okay, now I'm attacking this. Rook b1, queen b5 is now my plan. Remember I told you guys that these pieces are usually last to start doing something. I was not lying. Rook d7, I'm thinking e6 hits the rook, takes, pin the rook, apply pressure to the pinned rook. Let's hit him with e6. Already attacking the rook. Once he takes, the queen takes, this is pinned. If he moves the rook here, trying to pin the pawn, our rook is able to take on f7. So it's just winning in all variations. He took, let's take here. The rook is now pinned, and we know what we do to pin pieces. We apply pressure to them. Pawn c6 was played. Now it's just GG's. The rook is pinned. When a piece is pinned, we apply pressure to the pin piece. The next move is to take the rook, followed by checkmate. The opponent resigns. More Vienna game at the 1600 level. Stick around. Opponent is now 1600. More Vienna coming your way. E5, we go knight c3. We're about, okay, this is going to be the Vienna game. Against the Vienna game, we go bishop c4. Knight f6 was played. And then after knight f6, we're just going to be playing a very slow, regular development. Let's go knight to e2 here. Remember, the goal is to play f4. Like, your whole entire plan is going to be to play f4. He puts the bishop on b4. Now let's just get our king out the center of the board. f4 is our plan. We may play d3 followed by f4. He castles the king. Let's play d3 here. I'm assuming he's going to play h6. I wasn't expecting him to play knight to d4. It's not a terrible move, though. It's definitely not a terrible move. But f4 seems a bit easier for me to play. I'm also thinking of just going bishop to g5, pinning this knight. But maybe he's able to pull his bishop back to e7 and he's fine. So let's just continue with our plan of playing f4. Knight to d4 was not necessary. You don't move the same piece more than once in the opening stage of the game for no reason. Now, if he takes on f4, he's going to lose his knight. And if he takes on e2, he moves the same piece 1, 2, 3 times just to take a piece that only moved once. With that being said, he's going to be wasting 2 moves if he plays that. d6. d6 definitely makes some sense. Yeah, d6 is what he needs to play. Okay, he did it. He took with the knight. Let's just take with the queen. No need to take with the knight here. I'm not afraid of a little double pawn, especially if he wants to give up his bishop for a knight. Now let's take. Yo, this guy has to be careful. Like, I don't think he understands what's really happening. He took on f4. So I'm thinking, do we take on f4 with the bishop? I don't think so because he's able to play d5. And I was thinking bishop to g5 and then he takes. And then that's a bit too complex. But what if I just play pawn to e5 though? Like, this e5 move is also very, very thematic, especially if you're going to be playing the Vienna Gambit. So let's just play e5 here. Hit the knight. I'm not seeing any forward moves that the knight has. So that could be an issue. D5 is definitely an interesting move. He's basically saying, if I take his knight, he's going to take my bishop. And then if I take his pawn here, he's going to move his rook and attack my queen. He's definitely not going to take my pawn. It's usually not good to take the pawn. But I'm just going to pull my bishop back to b3 though. Now I'm still attacking his knight. He could also play rook to e8, but then I'm just going to take on f4. Like, this is all I need, to be honest. Now, one thing that may happen is he plays pawn c6 in the future, and my bishop is pointing towards this pawn chain. So I may need to play pawn c4, and then once he takes, my bishop takes, and then my bishop is a bit more active. He pulls the knight back to d7, though. And I think that's a mistake because now once he puts the knight here, the queen no longer guards the d pawn. So that's a drawback mistake. So if I take, and then even if he tries to take here, my queen is going to take. This pawn is dead, so I'm not in a rush to take it. So let's just take the free pawn on d5. Now my bishop is going to be super active because even if he plays c6 or move the knight or something to attack my bishop, I pull it back to b3. My bishop will always be attacking this pawn on f7. And again, the pawn on f4 is dead. So we're going to be taking that pawn whenever we want. Rook to e8 was played. I was expecting that move. Actively trying to sacrifice my bishop. King moves, I check here. It doesn't work though. Really doesn't work. So he's threatening to take on e5 with his knight. If I play bishop takes, he's still gonna take with the knight. Because then if I takes, he has queen takes. Okay, rook to e8 is actually not a bad move. I think I'm forced to play e6. Takes, king over. Okay, this is a bit tricky. This is a bit tricky because I think he's winning back the pawn. That's fine though. Let's take on f4. Taking on f4, knight takes e5 becomes a possibility. Because if I take the knight, the queen takes my bishop. And I'm not able to sack because the knight is going to take on f7. Okay, I don't know why he played king to f8. What was the purpose of king to f8? Well, I guess he's just trying to ensure that it's a very instructive video. Because look on this. He puts his king on the same line as my rook. Automatically, it's losing. The first way I'm seeing to win this game is bishop g5. Bishop g5, pawn to f6. Well, if queen takes g5, rook takes f7, check. King has to go here. Rook back to f5 wins the queen. But bishop g5, pawn f6, rook takes f6 will not work. With that being said, we're just going to be sacrificing on f7. King takes f7, bishop g5. But then he has knight f6, takes hit the queen. And if pawn takes, this has to be winning. Let's just take on f7. Like, sometimes you don't need to see everything. I don't want you guys to think that chess masters are able to calculate. Well, we're able to calculate a lot of moves in depth, but I don't want you to think that's the only thing that we use to win games. Sometimes you just need to be able to see three moves deep, or sometimes your evaluation skills just needs to be good. If he takes with the king, I check. The rook checks the king, the bishop attack the queen. Discovered, check. Blocks with the knight, I take hit the queen, so he did take with the king. I'm actually thinking of this check. This check is going to come in very handy very soon. But for now, let's check on g5. Knight to f6 is forced. That's what we saw. Now we take on f6 with check, attacking the queen. Now, once the pawn takes, I'm not going to play rook takes check because he's able to sack his queen and win back my queen. But then my queen swoops in to h5 with check. Now I'm forcing his king to move. I'm down by a piece, by the way. So I have to win the game right now. Like, if my attack does not work and I allow my opponent to consolidate, then I may lose the game. But there's no way this attack doesn't work. He moves the king. Let's say we take with the pawn. How will he prevent a pawn from going to f7? Not seeing it. And I also don't want to take with the rook because I want to have as much pieces in the attack. So let's take with the pawn. Maybe he plays rook to f8, and then I push king over. I check here, queen has to block, and that's going to be a checkmate. So rook to f8 doesn't work. He did play rook to f8. Okay, so it's f7 check. King here leads to mate. If f7 check, what if king here? If king here, I check. Queen block is mate. If king here, I check. He has to sack the queen or mate. Or I check, king here, check, king here, check. He's running. We're not playing that. We're going to be going with this one, check. Moving the king is mate. Moving the king here is also mate. Vienna. Remember what I told you guys about the F file? The action takes place on the F file in the Vienna. He moves his king to h8. This is just going to be a quicker checkmate. Once I play queen e5 check, he has to block with the queen. Queen takes f6 is going to be a checkmate. So let's go queen e5 check. Queen just has to block. And that's just a checkmate. More Vienna against 1700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now in the 1700 region. More Vienna coming your way. Let's go e4. So e5 was played. We're going to be playing knight to c3. And as I've been saying, they decide if we play the Vienna gambit or the Vienna game. Because he plays knight to c6, this is an indication that it's going to be a Vienna game. So let's just go bishop to c4 in this position. Pawn to d6 was played. And keep in mind, a move that we want to play is f4. Because we want to play f4, we're going to be playing the move knight to e2. Pawn to d3, pawn to f4. Remember what we said about the Vienna. In the Vienna, most of the action will be taking place on the F file. He develops his knight. Let's just use the time to castle or king. Like, we're not in any rush to play F4. F4 will eventually come. Bishop to E7. Let's play D3 first. First, we're going to be playing D3. And then once the king castle, now we play F4. This is the whole idea of the Vienna game. We want to get the most aggressive attack. He just chose to play bishop to e6. What he's trying to do here is he's trying to, once I takes and the pawn takes, he's trying to open up the f file for his rook. And that's not something that I'm going to allow. But there's a very cute idea that I want you guys to keep in mind in the Vienna. The pawn on f4 could go to f4 and attack the bishop. And even though the bishop takes, we're just going to take back. Yes, we have this double pawn, but our whole idea from here is it's going to be so hard for black to play this pawn to d5 move. His dark squared bishop is locked in. He plays pawn to h6, which gives us a hook, because now we're already thinking about sacrificial ideas or getting one of our pawn to the g5 square. After h6, I'm thinking of bishop e3, but knight g4 would be the most annoying move. So I'm thinking of playing knight g3 first, but I'm also trying to play pawn to g4. Okay, we're going to play king h. Oh, yeah, king to h1. Ensure that you play king to h1. Being a Vienna player, you must put your king on h1 because maybe it's not no, because a lot of times something comes to b6 and check your king or c5 and check your king, and then you're in some trouble. So ensure that you don't allow that. Knight back to d7 was played. That is a very logical move, by the way. He wants to put the knight on c5. He's also trying to play bishop to g5 just to get rid of his bad bishop. With that being said, because his knight no longer covers the d5 square, we're going to be playing the move knight to d5, hitting the bishop. But what we're basically doing is we're kind of allowing him to play bishop g5, knowing that if we take on g5, he's not going to be able to play queen takes. Instead, he plays knight c5, because my knight no longer guards e4. So he puts his knight on c5, attacking e4. So the question is, how do we guard e4? Do we even guard e4? Knight to c3. If I move my knight to c3, his knight gets the d4 score, but then I'm able to play bishop e3, hit the knight, and his knight is going to be forced to move unless he wants to give me a free pawn. So let's go knight to c3 here. Eventually, I'll be able to play bishop to e3. And again, if he plays bishop to g5, it's the same idea. One more idea that I want you guys to keep in mind, which I should have played, I definitely should have played it. Pawn to f6 was actually completely winning. Like if you could play pawn f6 and they have to take with the pawn, we take on h6 and that's GG's. And if the bishop takes, we could even sack the rook, take on h6 and that's GG's. But he decides to play bishop to g5. This way, I think he's just gonna. I think I could still play f6. Like what I was thinking is taking his bishop. Once the queen takes, I take the pawn, but let's not try to be greedy and try to grab a pawn. Let's try to get more than a pawn. Yeah, let's play f6. Let's still play f6. Before f6 would have been better though, don't get me wrong. But now playing f6 still damages his structure. Because if he takes and I play queen takes, he's not able to take because h6 is going to be hanging. So again, being a Vienna player, f4, f5, f6, very, very crucial idea. Most of the action will take place on the f file. He took on f6. This has to be bad for black. He actually took on f6. So if we take on g6, he takes with the pawn. I check on f6. The king moves. That's all right. I'm thinking of playing h4. That's what I'm thinking of playing. h4. And then If his bishop takes on h4, I play bishop takes h6, hit the rook. And then once the rook moves, I check on g5. And if the bishop block, yo, there's just so much that I could play here. Let's play h4. I like idea of h4. He did take. No, I could check. Actually, I could check. And if the bishop block, I check here because the bishop is not going to be able to take. But this is basically what I wanted to do. He puts the bishop back on g5. This attack is actually fun. I'm not going to lie. I'm thinking of rook takes f6. I'm thinking of queen to g4. Takes, pawn takes, knight check. King has to go to g7. Queen to g4. Yo, everything is winning. What's the quickest way to win though? All right. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to play queen to g4, pinning the bishop. That's what I'm going to do. He pulls the knight back to e6. Now the knight guards the bishop. Interesting. Knight takes f6 check. Knight takes f6 check is winning. The bishop is pinned, and if he sack the queen, we take the queen. So let's go knight takes f6 check. Once I play knight takes f6, now I have two pieces attacking this bishop. He only has one piece guarding the bishop. And if he moves his king to h8, that's just a free bishop. But I don't want to take the bishop. I want to play queen h5, followed by queen h6 checkmate. Yo, this is crazy because if I had played f6 before, it would have been even more brutal. But f6 here is just crazy, crazy. This is GG's. He moves his king to h8, and here's how we're going to be finishing. We're just going to play queen h6. Queen h6, if bishop takes, bishop here is not a checkmate though. That's the thing. So yeah, let's just take the bishop. Let's just take the bishop, and then if he plays knight takes, we play queen h5, and that's going to be leading to a checkmate. He plays king to g7. Where's the mate? Check, king takes, check, king back mate. Or check. Yeah, let's just pull back the bishop, check. So that way we're able to play queen h5 next move. But this is just GG's. Maybe he has to block with the bishop. But once he moves the king, it's going to be, well, my opponent resigns. More Vienna game against 1800 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1800. Let's play e4. E5 was played, and we're just going to play knight c3, Vienna game, Vienna gambit. Vienna gambit was chosen. Let's play pawn to f4. Taking the pawn is just losing. Knight c6 is just losing. d5 is actually the main move in this position. d6, I'll just play knight f3. So d5 was played. That's the correct move. We know that the move is to take on e5, hit the knight, and then once the knight takes, we play the move queen to f3. Now, I have been seeing a lot of knight to c6 in recent times. Knight takes c3 is also a move, but whenever they play knight c6, just remember not to take on e4. And once you remember not to take on e4, you should be good. 5. F5 is also a move. I've seen people try f5 in these positions as well. Okay, but this one decided to take on c3. Let's just take back. And c5 should be playable here. Knight c6 will make it too easy for me. I think he needs to play c5 so that way I at least have some weaknesses after d4. But he still plays knight c6. So let's just go d4. And we know what the plan is from here. Bishop goes to d3, knight goes to e2, king is castled, start the attack. So bishop e7, let's go bishop to d3. Once he castles, both of my bishops are going to be pointing towards this king. He castled the king. Let's go knight to e2 here. The goal is to castle. Usually f6 is the move that makes me calculate mostly. But one thing I want to tell you guys is meeting f6 with queen to h5 is usually not a terrible idea. I think now he needs to play f6, and then after queen h5, he plays f5, or maybe he just needs to play f5 in one move. But it's usually f5 or f6 followed by f5. So he pulls the knight back to b8, and I kind of understand why he would play a move like that. He wants to play c5 or c5 followed by c4 to trap my bishop. But how do we do this now? First, we have to castle the king. King safety is a must, so let's get our king out the center of the board. Pawn c5, I think, is coming. Now, after pawn c5, I'm also considering taking on c5 because I was thinking about just moving my knight and then c4, but then bishop e2, and my position is not as aggressive anymore. So if he plays c5, I may just take, so that way my bishop maintains this diagonal. So he did play c5. Let's take, and that's the reason why he should have played c5 from before. So bishop takes. Let's move the king. Okay, now he plays b6. Guess he wants to put his bishop on the same line as my queen. This guy's not playing too badly. Let's go knight to g3 here, though. Usually it's knight g3 or knight f4. I like knight to g3 because the knight could go to f5 in the future, especially if he puts his bishop here, then there's just not going to be any piece covering the f5 square. Okay, he plays g6. G6 is an immediate blunder, and that's actually very, very funny because notice how I have two pieces pointing towards f7, right? The rook and the king is the only two pieces that he has guarding f7. But what if I'm able to play bishop h6 attacking the rook? This is removing the guard. He's actually not able to move the rook because if he moves the rook, I'm just going to take the f7 pawn, and that's mate, which is why he left it hanging and play bishop to b7. Now the question is, do I take? Do I take now or do I wait? Do I wait one move? For example, can I play knight h5? Because knight h5, if he takes, queen to g3 will still be a checkmate. Knight h5, he's still not able to move the rook. Knight h5, maybe he plays knight d7, then take the rook, then the queen takes, then check, knight takes, pawn takes. What does that give me though? I think I have an idea. It's going to be bringing a lot of pieces in the attack. I'm thinking knight h5, knight d7, pawn e6, hit the knight, and if pawn takes, then I take. And then queen takes is forced. Then I play queen to g4, attack e6. My rook attacks the queen. I'm threatening to sack on g6, and then all the pieces joins the attack. Let's try it that way. So let's go knight to h5. So again, he's just not able to take the knight due to this check. So it's not hope chess business. We're just trying to get our knight to the f6 square. But he may play knight d7, preventing our knight from going to the f6 square, and that's where e6 will come in. Oh, he plays bishop back to d7 instead. Okay, bishop back to e7 is also not too bad. Knight f6 takes, and then he gets a chance to move the rook. Pawn e6 takes, queen takes, then I do the same thing. So let's play e6. It's actually the same thing, but he just didn't develop his knight. I think it would have been better for him to develop his knight. He should be able to take my knight though. No, he can't. If he takes the knight, queen to f5, is GG's. That would be crazy. Because queen f5, my queen and my bishop points towards h7. That would be crazy. F5. F5 is definitely a move. If he plays f5, then it's time to simply take the rook. If he takes, I takes, queen g4. That's my plan. So he did play f5. I'm trying to not be in a rush to take the rook. That's what I'm trying to do. My knight is still not under attack because I have this. Queen to Queen to g3. Let's say he moves the rook. Queen to e5 wins the game on the spot. So that's nice. So he's still not able to move the rook. Let's go queen to g3. I'm also threatening to play knight f4 followed by knight takes g6. I think my bishop is stronger than his rook at this point, so I don't want to be too materialistic and take the rook. I think it's best if I just focus on my attack. Bishop to d6 was played, was kind of slightly expecting that move, kind of slightly. Okay, now I'm thinking knight f4 because I want to sack. Knight, knight f. Yeah, let's go knight f4. Maybe bishop g5. So he is saving his rook, but the attack stays, and the attack is what we want. But if I do not deliver a checkmate here, then it means I should have taken the rook. So I have to deliver a checkmate. So rook to e8, I'm expecting. Queen e8, he does not want to save the rook, and I do not want to take the rook. Oh boy. Okay, maybe I should just take the rook. Well, that's the only square for the rook next. And if he goes there, I go here. I can't go there. I can go there. Check. King overtakes. Whoa. So now I'm going to play rook to e1. If rook to f6, rook e1, rook f6, knight h5. If he takes, I take with check. King move, then I take. Oh, but his bishop is going to be here. Still winning though. Let's go rook e1. The goal is to bring pieces in the attack. I think all my pieces are slowly doing something now. So bishop back to e7. Well, no, I don't have this annoying pin anymore, but I'm not able to sack. He's trying to prevent me from pushing the pawn. Do I take the rook? No. And if bishop takes, I push. And if queen takes, I sack. Yeah, it's time to. I think it's time to take the rook. I think taking the rook helps me in some way because if queen takes, I may not sack, but I'll consider sacking. Probably I'm gonna sack. I'm probably gonna sack because I have enough pieces in the attack, and I'm not seeing what these pieces are doing. So that's my justification. So king takes was played. Then I just sacrifice everything. Knight takes g6 check. Oh, but then he has queen takes check, king over. I want to sack on f5. If I'm able to sacrifice on f5, that is winning. So we're going to be putting the knight back on h5. The knight on h5 is poisoned, by the way. He's never going to be able to take that knight. But if he takes the knight, rook takes f5 is an immediate checkmate. Oh, and I am threatening checkmate in two moves. I'm actually threatening to take this pawn, and then if he takes, queen g7 is going to be a mate. Okay, now he has to be careful, careful. Knight h5 comes with threat. Okay, so he moves the king. He moves the king. But we are still allowed to sacrifice on f5, even though he's just not going to take. But it's a pawn. What do we take with, though? That's the question. I think we need to take with the rook. So that way I'm able to play knight f6 next. Or queen e5 could be threatening mate. It's crazy. I have so many pieces hanging and he's not able to take them. I also like the idea of rook to f7. So that way I could check on g7, seeing that my knight guards it. And the guy's just not developing his knight. I'm fine with that though. I'm not gonna tell him to develop his knight. Okay, he develops the knight, but rook to f7 is actually the winning move. Because now I'm threatening to sacrifice on g6, and this is really going to be leading to a checkmate. So pulling the bishop back will not help. In fact, pulling the bishop back loses even quicker, because knight to f6 forks the king and the queen. But we do not want the queen, because once the king goes here, that's just a checkmate. More Vienna game against a 1900 player. Our opponent is now in the 1900 region. Let's play e4. We're trying to do more Vienna. Let's go knight c3. And if knight c6, it's a Vienna game. We are playing a Vienna game. Let's develop our bishop to c4. The idea is simple here. Now, one thing I want to tell you guys is whenever you see knight to f6, it's actually better to play d3 rather than knight e2 because they're actually still threatening this knight takes e4 idea. So if you play knight e2, there is knight e4 followed by d5. So let's just play d3 in this position. Okay, he plays h6. Idea of h6 is to prevent any piece from going to g5. But we're just going to be continuing with the regular setup. Let's go knight to e2. We're going to be castling our king. On the next move, bishop c5. Let's get our king out the center of the board. My opponent also castles, and now I'm trying to play f4. But I'm not allowed to play f4 because of this bishop. So let's play pawn to h3. Let's go pawn to h3, preventing the knight from going to g4. And then after this pawn to d6 move, we're going to play knight a4 because the bishop is not able to go back. So once we're able to play knight a4, hit the bishop, we're going to be gaining the bishop. Not for free, but it's going to be easier for us to play f4 here. So he pulls the bishop back. Let's take the bishop. And then once he takes, we're now able to freely play f4. And if you're playing with the black pieces, I recommend that you play knight a5 and just pick this off the board. So he plays bishop to e6. If I takes, he takes, and then I'm not really seeing my attack anymore. So I'm thinking of just playing bishop to b5 here. Bishop to b5. If d5 I take and then I take. Otherwise, I should be able to play something like knight to g3, guarding the pawn. And then if he takes, I take with the pawn. Because pawn to d5 is also an idea that Vienna players, well, people who play against the Vienna wants to do. Knight g3, pawn d5. Okay, let's go bishop to b5. Let's go bishop to b5. Pawn to f5 is also a very thematic idea when you're doing the Vienna game. You know, it hits the bishop, and then you can actually think about moves like g4, g5 to attack the opponent's knight. Knight to d4 here. I would definitely not be afraid of that. Maybe if he plays knight back to e7, I'll be afraid because he's trying to play moves like c6, b5, and trap my bishop. But if he does that, then I'm able to play f5. So I'm doing fine here. Okay, he pulls the knight back to a7. That's an interesting square for a knight. Okay, my bishop is under attack though, so let's just pull it back. If b5, I go back to b3. If takes, I takes, and then everything is going to be normal. Otherwise, I could be threatening to either play f5, hit the bishop. So he attacks the bishop. Let's just go back. If he ever wants to trade here, I'm just going to take back. At least I could say my rook gets the open file. But then he plays c5 instead. The guy's like, nah, I'm not going to trade. Okay, let's say I play f5, hit the bishop. Bishop takes, pawn takes, and I'm just fine. Or takes, takes. I could take, takes, 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 and then he gets the ugliest pawn structure though. But then it's going to be harder for me to attack him. And I want to be able to attack him. So let's play f5, hit the bishop, force the bishop to move. After takes, we take, and then the idea could be g4, g5. So he took. Let's take back. My rook gets the file. It's very important that I'm aware that my rook is unprotected here because he could just move this and then I'm in trouble. So d5 was played, very thematic move. Was also expecting that. Like, no once he plays, he's doing the correct thing, by the way. He's basically counter-attacking in the center. I'm thinking of doing something fancy here, like a sacrifice. Like knight g3, and then if he takes, I go knight h5. No, that's not going to work. I think I have to take. Knight g3 takes, takes, and then I have a backward pawn. Yeah, I think I have to take. Now he has to take with the queen, I think. And then I may just play knight to g3. Yeah, this guy's playing very, very strong. So he took with the queen. Let's go knight to g3. I want to play moves like knight to h5, hit the knight, and if I'm able to get rid of the knight on f6, then I should be able to play moves like f6, and then my attack is going to be finally coming in. But he's playing very, very strong. Maybe e4? No, e4 is not an option. Okay, what other move I should be expecting? Maybe queen d4 check? Queen d4 check, I'm just going to move those. So he brought his knight back in the game. Remember about this? Let's just trade here. And then after his rook takes, we play knight to h5. I'm trying to get rid of this knight so that way I'm able to play f6. So if he moves away the knight, we play f6. If he takes, we take back with the threat of playing f6. But I think he's going to take, and then play f6 himself. And then if that happens, I'm thinking of just sacrificing. And then after takes, I check. And after the king moves, I take. And then it doesn't mean I'm winning. Like, remember, guys, whenever you see me do these bishop sacrifices to expose someone's king, it doesn't mean the sacrifice is completely winning, even though like maybe 60% of the time it's going to be completely winning. But sometimes the opponent has a defense. But the defense that they has, it's like some engine continuation that is just so hard to find. So he took, let's take on h5. And then he plays e4. Now, e4 is also a fine move. I was expecting f6, but if I play f6, he takes my queen. So if I takes, the queen takes f6, and I'm chilling, no? Let's do that. Let's take. If the queen takes, we get f6. Once we get f6, we got what we wanted. So queen takes, I kind of want to sack the bishop. Like, you guys know that I want to sack the bishop already. Well, let's just play f6. Let's go f6. Ensure that you're aware of the possible checks on your king because you're playing the Vienna and we know about this diagonal. His rook is on an open file. Queen to g6. That could be a move, apart from the fact that it's just blundering a pawn. We're definitely not going to trade here. Takes, takes, push, king over. Wait. Takes, takes, push, king over. Okay, I don't have anything. I wanted to get my bishop somewhere with a check, but let's just take the free pawn. And I could say that I'm winning here because he's just not able to take. Taking is going to destroy his king. I'm threatening to take and destroy his king. If he takes a pawn, think, oh, this pawn is guarded. He's not able to take this pawn. So what is he going to play though? What did he see that I didn't see? Okay, he took the pawn. Guy chooses to expose his king. I want to do a rook lift, but we're definitely not trying to allow this spin. I mean, that's a free pawn. Yeah, let's just take the free pawn. Let's just take some material. If queen takes, I should be able to take on h6. Otherwise, I'm threatening to take on b7, which would fork his rook and his knight, so he has to be careful. And if he plays a move like knight e5 or knight d4, then I'm just going to take on b7, hitting the rook. So we are in good shape here, but it will still take some technique for us to be able to convert this. So knight d4, we were expecting that move. Let's take, hit the unprotected rook. The knight is unprotected as well. Okay, I'm assuming he's going to put his rook on a1. Seems to make the most sense. Okay, he plays rook to e8. Rook to e8, queen to d7, attacks both unprotected pieces, but then he has knight check. Okay, let's go queen to d7. Hit the unprotected knight, hit the unprotected rook. So even if he checks me with the knight, I should be able to play king to h2. And if queen check, I go back to h1. Then he has to save his rook. And then after he saves his rook, I should be able to defend my position. I'm ahead by 2 pawns though. So if I'm able to safely trade the queens and get like 2 pass pawns or 1 pass pawn over here, that should be winning as well. Okay, he plays rook to e2. That's a nice move because he's threatening a checkmate on g2. Didn't see that one at all. Okay, we have to defend against this. We have to defend against this. Let's check the king first. Once he moves the king, we're going to be playing queen to d5. We have to guard our g2 square. He moves the king. Let's play queen d5, guarding the g2 square. It's getting a bit tricky now because he's able to take something here. And then the knight could join the attack. Okay, so he took. Okay, let's go bishop to e3, hit the knight. If check, I go king up. If check, I go back. And then he has to defend his f7 pawn. So check, I go king up. And if he check, I go king back. And then he has to defend his f7 pawn. So let's go king back. If he takes here, I take on f7 and he's going to either lose his rook or get checkmate if he takes here. So I think it's best for him to just pull his queen back. Wait. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Pull the queen back. And then I check. He blocks with the queen, grab the queen, and then it's going to be drawn. I think it's just drawn. Yeah, this guy played very, very well. So how this guy played against my Vienna is very nice. I think he used up too much of his time though. So I should still be able to win if I just play fast enough. Queen to g6 is the move that he needs to find. For sure, for sure. Queen to g6, I could even try rook to f3. So that way knight to g3 is not a huge threat. But he's thinking, he's still thinking. It's taking him too long to find these moves. So he took the pawn. Let's take on f7 with check. The king has to move. And this should lead to some checkmate. Let's take on f6 first with check. He moves the king. First of all, checking here could pick up his rook. But then there's knight check, and then I move, and then he checks. So we have to go for a mate here. We have to go for a mate here. Check, king up. How does this work? Check, king here. All right, so we're going to check here. No, that was not the move. Let's go back. I think we have to, let's repeat the position. After the king goes here, we check. Wait, what did I see? Oh, he goes here. My rook is able to join the attack. I actually did not see this. I did not see this, but this should lead to a checkmate. Check, king up, check, king up, and then that's mate. That's kind of crazy. So we check here, king has to go here, then we check here, king has to go here, and then that's going to be a checkmate. Okay, he decides to block with the queen. Pawn check? No, let's just take the queen. I mean, let's take the queen. He has to take with the pawn, and my opponent resigns. More Vienna game at the 2000 level. Stick around. Our opponent is now 2000. We're still gonna be hitting him with the Vienna. Knight c3. What are we gonna get? Vienna game? Vienna gambit? Vienna gambit it is. He develops the knight. Let's hit him with f4. Okay, he's 2000. He's not going to take. I assumed he knew that the move was to play f5. And then after f5, we take on e5, hit the knight. The knight takes on e5. Now we notice that there's this coming, so we play queen to f3. If you watch to this far, you should already know what's happening here. So this shouldn't be the time where you're like, oh, I'm learning stuff. You should be trying to see what are the different plans that's going to be happening in the middle game. For example, knight c6, I've been facing knight c6 a lot because there's a trap with knight c6. We are not winning a pawn on e4, because if I take on e4, he's not going to take back. He's going to play knight d4 and hit the queen. With that being said, we must play bishop to b5 first, pinning the knight so that way the knight is not able to jump to d4, and then we continue with our regular procedure. Usually from here, they take the knight, we take back, we play d4, and then we develop normally. So after they take, we take with the b pawn. The goal from here is to play d4. I'm yet to see someone plays immediate a6 because I want to play d4 and pull the bishop back to d3. But if he plays a6, I don't want to play bishop back to d3. But I wouldn't want to put the bishop on e2, then play d4, then go back to d3. So I would be forced to take the knight. He plays bishop to e6 though, so let's just go d4 here. And then if he plays e6, I'll be able to pull the bishop back to d3. From here though, it's just going to be okay. Okay, now he plays a6. We knew this. Let's pull the bishop back to d3. Knight e2 is now the plan. And then we're just going to get our king castled and we're fine. Y'all remember the game where the 700 took on d4, and then after takes he check, and then I block with the queen, he takes here, and then I had to play rook to b1, and then he castled, and then I just went knight d2 and hit the queen. That was weird. So queen to d7 was played. Bishop to g4 could be possible, but bishop g4 is not a move that we're afraid of, to be honest. So let's just continue with our plan. If the bishop goes to g4, we just move the queen somewhere, and then eventually we're going to be able to chase away the bishop. He develops the other bishop. Let's get our king out the center of the board. Now we're going to be starting with our attack. All our pieces are active. Remember that we don't really care too much about our dark squared bishop because it's already active. It's not like we're going to be putting it on e3 and all of a sudden it's making a difference in the position. So he castled the king. My a rook is the only piece that's not doing anything. So maybe rook to b1 makes some sense. But usually the right plan for black is to play b5, knight a5, knight c4. So maybe I would just be helping him. So he castled. How do we continue our attack from here? Queen h5, threatens are made, pawn h6, pawn g3, queen h6, rook moves. Yeah, let's just go knight f4 or knight g3. Like knight g3. Knight g3 comes with the idea of knight to f5. And then knight f4 comes with the idea of eliminating the bishop and getting access to f7. I think I've done something like that in this series. So knight f5, I'm going to have a lot of pieces on the f5 square. Obviously, he's not going to take with the bishop because that's giving up the bishop here. But then if he doesn't do anything, my target is going to be g7. I kind of like the Vienna. I'm not gonna lie. We're still not afraid of Bishop G4. Remember not to be afraid of Bishop G4. We move the queen. We play H3. We're fine. Okay, F6. F6. Let me teach you guys something about F6. You see, whenever you see them play F6, the rook is on the same line as the queen, so you have to be a bit careful. However, once they play F6, queen to H5 becomes even more forcing for us because if queen H5, they're not able to play G6 because we're gonna sack, likely. We're likely gonna sacrifice. I mean, it has to be, let's go queen h5. It has to be queen h5. If h6, our bishop could come in with sack. If f5, there's one, two, three defenders. We have one, two, three, four attackers. So if f5, we should be able to take a free pawn. So what is he going to play? I think he's going to play g6. Because, like, if I takes check king over, know that it's winning. It has to be winning. Oh, rook to f4 with the idea of rook h4. Oh, but then he has pawn takes. The bishop covers h4. We're going to see g6, guys. We are going to see g6 or f5. Takes, check, king over. If king over, we take on f6, hit the bishop, threaten mate. What's wrong with me? That's just GG's. So we did see g6, my fellow peeps. Ensure that you like this video. Let's sacrifice the bishop on g6. Also check out chessrefs.com. Once he takes, we take on f6, and that's a GG's. Let's check. King now has to go here. Okay, that's free, right? And it threatens mate. I'm not missing anything. I'm assuming he's just gonna sacrifice back the bishop. Am I able to get more though? We want more. Can I get more? Knight h5 threatens mate here. Knight h5 threatens mate. Moving the bishop is easy defense because he's able to block. Rook f4 threatens mate, pawn takes, and I don't have anything. Let's just take on f6. Let's just take on f6. He has to sacrifice back his bishop. And then once he sacrifices back his bishop, we're going to be ahead by what? We're going to be ahead by 1 or 2 points, if I'm doing my math correctly. Okay, guys, like maybe I'm the one who just don't know what to do with these pieces, but I just don't use them. It's crazy. I do not use my dark squared bishop and my a1 rook until like later down in the game. For example, maybe after bishop takes and then I takes rook takes check, queen block. Maybe that's when I hit him with something like bishop to g5 to win the end game. And then that's when this rook is gonna come over. But I'm assuming he just has to. He's just burning time. He's probably trying to find something, but he has to sack. Yeah, we were expecting him to sack. Let's just take the rook. And then once the bishop takes, we take here with check. If he moves the queen, he's going to lose another bishop. So he has to move the king. This would be the perfect time for these pieces to just join the attack. So he moves the king, a check. Oh, yes, yes, yes. I love this bishop. Because now if I check here and he blocks with the queen, I'm still able to take this bishop. But if I check here and he goes here, this bishop can join the game with tempo. So let's give a check here. And if he puts his king on h8, it's GG's, it's game over because bishop to g5 comes with a checkmating threat. So he has to sacrifice something. He moves the king. Let's go bishop to g5, my favorite piece. And then bishop to f6 is going to lead to a checkmate. So I'm assuming he's going to play rook to f8 here. So that way, once I check, he sacks the rook. But it's just GG's at the end of the day. Okay, knight back to e7. Didn't do anything. That's just a checkmate.